Well, lovely magical writers, we are in for a treat today because our guest is Becky Walsh. She's a very dear friend of mine, and we met many years ago. I think it was at a Hay House party, but we'll talk about that in a second. Becky Walsh, how do you describe Becky Walsh? Oh my goodness, she is an intuitive healer and coach. She's a Hay House author, as I've already said. She's a prolific writer, speaker, entertainer. She's a stand-up comedian with a wonderful show that she'll tell you about towards the end. And she's had a radio show, a TV show. I don't think there's anything this wonderful woman hasn't done. So welcome, Becky.
And somehow in all of that, I have still not made a ton of money. I think if I stuck to one of those things, one of them would have been a really good idea, but I didn't stick to one of them. I kind of kept moving around. Mine.
You have an eclectic mix of talents.
I do. And the ton of money is in the post. There we go. Second class, clearly.
So Becky's written some amazing books. Probably the best known is her Hay House book, which is called You Do Know, which I think is one of the best titles I've ever heard, because we do know, don't we? We do know.
Well, I didn't, because I actually came up with about 200 titles. Because when I was getting, 200. I'm not kidding. When we were talking to Hay House about the book, they really said we have to come up with an incredible title, otherwise deal's off the table. And I was like, okay. And we talked about juxtapositions in titles, like the Effort and Spiritual Guide, that how juxtapositions really work. But all of these, at the time, there were so many kind of like 10 steps to intuition, beginner's guide to. And I think it was more about really saying something that actually captures me as an author. And also the way that I wanted it to. I think I got so irritated with pain-poking self-help books. The ones that are a little bit like coaches webinars, fluffity fluff, 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 nothing, poke around the problem, talk about 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 how we're going to solve the problem, but later on in the book, later on in the webinar, later on in the book, later on in the webinar, and then sign up for my online course, because it's not in the book at all. And I think I really wanted to capture a title that basically said, you have this, you just don't know where to look. And this book is going to tell you exactly where it is that you need to look. Instead of it being kind of like a book that was more about the author's flannel, I really wanted a book that was about the reader's brilliance. And that's what I really wanted to kind of like pull out, was that the reader would read this not thinking, oh gosh, this author's incredibly smart, but my God, I do know, I am incredibly smart. My intuition is on target. I know who I am and I know what I'm doing. I wanted someone to come to even the end of the first chapter and feel that, and then that escalate all the way through the book. And I think I achieved that.
Brilliant. I love that. So you've just basically been a mirror.
Yeah, a mirror to somebody, like a mirror and an amplifier to what people have inside of them. And because I think without that, it's like going along and seeing an inspirational speaker and you walk out of there going, they were amazing. I'm such a twat, that you quite often walk away from anything like seeing a TED talk. I'm a senior speaker creator for TED Talks, for one TED Talk in Bristol. And one of the things that I was always conscious of when finding speakers is that you don't want the audience to walk away thinking I'm less than. You want an audience to walk away feeling inspired. And a great speaker, great artist, a great writer inspires their audience. And I know when I've read books, no matter how self-help, personal development they are, that I have sometimes read books that have made me feel like I'm being talked down to. And because at the end of the day, nobody likes to be told what to do. We want to be seen and heard. And when you're reading a book, it's really hard to see and hear somebody, but you can tap into a general zeitgeist of your audience. You know who your readers are and what they feel, because in a sense, you need to write the book you need to read. And if you write the book from a place of being an expert, you need to write the book as it unfolds in you and you learn from it as you're writing it. You need to write the book you need to read. If you do not need to read the book you're writing, you probably shouldn't be writing it. If you're writing it from, I know, I'm telling you, I'm an expert, you're not coming up with anything new, because nothing is being channeled through you. You know, it's like when you're talking to a friend and you give advice that you learn from and you go, oh my God, that was genius. You know, I had a friend of mine, she said something once and we're in conversation, she said something, I went, that's amazing, I need to write that down. And she went, you did? I said, well, clearly I didn't. And she said, no, you did. I'm quoting your book.
That's got to be the best accolade, you know, that's the best testimonial you can receive. Somebody quoting your words back to you.
And you didn't remember writing them down. Oh God! I mean, it's brilliant. But you know, and this is the thing. I think that you know, the book almost kind of comes through you in a way that once you've kind of like given birth to it, you just let it go and go into the world. But Elizabeth Gilbert talks about this a lot, like about that genius, having genius, not being a genius. And if you write a book from the point of being a genius, you're going to get on my nerves because you're going to be one of these splainy. What I want is inspired. I want to feel the energy of the author being just as excited to write this book as I am to read it.
Oh, love that. Oh my gosh, that's a soundbite. Thank you very much. That's exactly, I think from my experience, I've been told so many times that a book writes you. You know, we think we're writing a book and we have to live it, don't we? I think we have to live it, or we have to live it either before we write the book or afterwards. It seems that that's the kind of contract we have with the universe. Yeah. Is that your experience too?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, quite often the books have started talking to me before I've even kind of decided I want to write a book. And this is very common, but there's a rejection period of, oh, get off me, you know, I don't want to do it, no, don't make me do it. You know, and I think like the first book I ever wrote was called Advanced Psychic Development. And one of the problems with writing a book is you can write a book and your opinions and thoughts change. And I think when people are frightened of writing a book, it's the fact that we're frightened of our words stagnating us, that someone will read a book and think that that's who we are when we've moved on from it. And so my thoughts on what psychic ability is was really honed in You Do Know. But the Advanced Psychic Development book was simply because I had a radio show and I was supporting a friend at the time who wasn't too, he was struggling with his health, and he needed a project. So he had a fascination with ghosts, and both of us were stage managers in theatre at the time. So I said, so how about we write a book about theatres and ghosts? So we decided to write that book together. And as we were trying to get a publisher, and I had a radio show at the time, so I was gaining in acclaim, and we presented the idea to a publisher, and he said, I don't like that book idea, don't want that book, but I want you. So what do you want to write? And when I was studying psychic ability, and I was a student at the College of Psychic Studies, where I later became a teacher, there was there was beginner's guide, 10 steps to psychic development and all that, but there was nothing for anyone who knew that they got it and wanted something more advanced. Mm-hmm. So I said to him, I said, I'd like to write a book on advanced psychic development. And he went, great, off you go then. And I went, great. There's no books to research because there are no books. So I kind of realised at that point in time, and this is something that I did much more strongly with You Do Know, which is a book on intuition. So it's You Do Know, Learning to Act on Intuition Instantly, which is, I wonder, you know what you said there, which is perfect, which is you said, you know, that the book writes you. Mm-hmm. Well, I also think books write society. So if you think about anything, I think you've got two ways of thinking about this. You can either write reflectively, so you're writing in reflection, and that might be kind of like a memoir or a biography or something like that, or you write in projection. Mm-hmm. And anyone who writes in the moment is probably missing it, because it can take about 1 year to 2 years before your book's going to come out anyway, even from the point of it being finished. It takes a while, typesetting, especially, you know, if you're with a publisher, they have a conveyor belt of books. So I've always wanted to write books that were going to change and be part of a revolution. And if you don't believe me, you think about George Orwell's 1984. I think that one of the reasons why I really love fiction and Stranger in a Strange Land, Robert Heinlein, anything like that, was very much about, they were creating a zeitgeist, they were creating a future. They might not have realized it at the time, but there was something that was in creation. So when it comes to personal development, you're writing a personal development book for somebody to feed off it and create themselves. So to create their intuition, to create a mindset, to create a way of thinking. But I wanted to go one greater than that with You Do Know. So I actually took the shamanic medicine plant ayahuasca to be able to finish the book, so that I could come up with something that was teaching the future. So You Do Know kind of came out, I think, about 7-8 years ago. And at the time that I was writing it for about 5 years in advance. Now, you think about 7-8 years ago, I mean, good God, weren't things different? And certainly you would never have heard the word fake news. So while I was on the ayahuasca, in actual fact, I didn't really need the ayahuasca. I already had this answer, but the ayahuasca kind of hit me about the face and head with a wet fish and kind of said, no, it didn't. But, I realized that what was desperately needed for mental health. And mental health, I hate that. Let's call it emotional health, because we call it mental health because it can be sanitized with pills. If we call it emotional health, we understand that emotions are something you have to journey through, and there is no way of getting around it. So it's something that you have to journey through. So let's call it emotional health. And I realized that for emotional health, you really need to trust yourself. Because for the 20+ years I've seen clients, does he fancy me? Is this relationship? What's going on with this? Why did he say that? Why did she do this? Oh my God, my boss is a bitch, da, 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 da. All of this stuff, it came down to, I don't trust myself. I don't trust myself. And when you trust yourself to make good decisions about other people, well, you can do me out of business, but when you trust yourself to make good decisions about other people, you have a resilience that defies anything life can throw at you. So for me, writing You Do Know was, I wanted to write a book for where we would be in this moment in time, and where we are in this moment in time in the world of fake news, mental brainwashing, all of the stuff that we get on social media. The book You Do Know is literally the antidote to that. It is the antidote to fear. It is the antidote to being controlled by fear. It allows you to make your choices without listening to rhetoric that is almost religious, especially around COVID. But that this rhetoric is kind of, and you may have a gut instinct that comes from your gut brain, or a heart longing that comes from your heart brain, or just a damn hard knowing that has no words. But unless you trust yourself, you can't act on it. Which is why it was You Do Know, learning to act on intuition instantly. And it was literally written for this time without me having any idea of what was around the corner. And I had an inkling, but I didn't realize the huge amount of societal shift into fear that we are currently in, and how important that book would be as a manual for that. So I think anyone who wants to be a writer and thinks, oh, I'm going to write something for now, you can't even possibly imagine. So the best thing to do, I think, I'm not endorsing going and taking that,
Everyone does say ayahuasca,
is ask your muse, or whatever you want to call it, I want to write a book for 5 years' time. What do I need to know now? Whether or not you're a fiction author or a self-help author, or whoever you are, what needs to be channeled through me that uses me as a vessel that people are going to need in about 5 years' time?
Oh, that's so important, isn't it? I mean, that for me, the writing process is it can be quite convoluted. It can be a long, winding path. You never really know. It doesn't really go in a straight line. But as you say, when you can reference yourself and you can trust yourself to bring through whatever needs to come through, you're winning. It's I'll sit down first thing in the morning. I don't know what's going to come through. It can be a poem, it can be a prayer, it can be a song, it can be some really gritty scene from a novel. It doesn't really tell me what it's going to be until I sit down and I allow it to come through. But as you say, that kind of trusting and knowing that whatever it is, you are a vessel, you are a channel for whatever it is that needs to come through. Tell us about your personal writing process. Does it follow a pattern, or is it different depending on what you're writing or creating? Tell us about that.
Gosh,
behind the scenes in Becky Walsh's life.
Behind the scenes, Becky Walsh's life. So my stuff usually starts with getting frustrated or angry. I tend to find clients come with patterns, and so what will happen is, for about a week, I'll have clients come to see me, and it's like same problem, different face. Same problem, different face. And then I'm like, oh, so this needs to be a blog post. Okay, so this is something that, because I think that we're part of a collective consciousness. And I think that when someone's going through one issue, then there's multiple people go through that issue, and then somehow they all manage to find me, or they're repeated clients that have come back that I haven't seen for years. And I'll go, okay, so that needs to be a blog post, because there'll be other people who are not booking appointments with me who might need this. So I'll write all of the stuff I've been saying all week to a wider audience and send it out as a blog post. Or more commonly recently, I've turned that into a film. So I've done sort of YouTube films for that. When I find the same thing coming up, but it's like a societal thing, like I'm seeing it, you know, maybe on social media, or I'm hearing the same thing in the news, and it starts to become like a constant annoyance, like a constant kind of subject. It's the same thing, it's the same thing, it's the same thing. And it isn't sort of, you know, I mean, you might say, okay, well, if you're looking for a red car, you'll see red cars everywhere. It starts to become one of those, but it starts to become kind of like almost obsessive. So people will start talking to me about it, and then I'm like, okay, so I'm getting the nudge that I need to write. And then I will sit down and start writing. And that's usually when it works. And my process really is to mind map the whole thing. So what I do is I write down absolutely everything that I can possibly think of about this subject, leave it, come back, write more. And it might be that I repeat myself in places, and it doesn't really matter. And then once I think my head is completely empty of all of the words that are related to the subject, I then colour code everything that matches or goes together. So say, for example, if it's something to do with emotion, then that might be blue, and I colour everything that's blue. It might be that some of the things are emotion, but also a resolution. And that might be that I colour that in red. And so something might get more than one colour, and that's perfectly fine, until eventually all of the colours start to kind of like map out, and every word has got a colour. I then take, it sounds difficult, but it's really not, then take all of the colours and I write the list of everything that is that colour. And then I work out that's a chapter, and all of the other comments are subheadings. So they don't all end up being subheadings, but it just breaks it down. And then I work out, right, so if there's a formula to this, and even in self-help, I look at Joseph Campbell's hero's journey arc. So, you know, the kind of, you know, the hero rejects the journey, then the hero realizes that he really ought to get out of the cupboard, and then meets somebody who helps him kind of like discover who he is, and then he gets to the end of the day, other females are available, and then kind of, you know, goes on that kind of like journey arc. And, you know, I do that journey arc with self-help as well, because you are taking a person on a hero's journey in the book as well. So there's no point flatlining what you're doing, what you're saying. You need to walk that journey with them so that they get to this point of realization in order to kind of like, you know, get to the wind up bit. So I make sure that there is an energetic arc that goes through the book, and then I just start somewhere. And it will start quite often with overhearing a conversation, sometimes in a coffee shop, sometimes on the bus, but I'll overhear a conversation, and that conversation will be maybe a subheading in the book, and I'll start there. So I very rarely start a book at the beginning, because I've mapped out the arc, so I don't need to worry about the beginning. So I'll start a book wherever it starts speaking to me first. Then I'll write another bit, and then another bit, and then another bit. And the only downside of this particular technique is sometimes I end up repeating myself. So I'll say the same thing, sometimes in different words, but this is the art form of the editor. So I always make sure I've got a really great editor who just goes, repeat it yourself from chapter 6, paragraph 4. You've repeated yourself. So somebody who can actually spot all of that. But I can't write beginning to end. If I try and write at the beginning, I'm always trying to be too clever, too articulate, too smart. I write the beginning usually somewhere near the end. Because by then, because a beginning always needs to be really powerful in order to grab the reader's attention. Because when you go into a bookshop, you go, what's this about? You usually read the first couple of pages, you know. And also on Amazon, you get to see the first couple of pages. So the beginning of your book needs to be absolutely bang on. And you won't have the fire in your belly or the punch for that kind of beginning because you'll be worrying about getting it right. You need to be nearly finished in the book to write the punchy beginning, where you don't have the worrying about whether or not you've got a book, whether or not it's going to work, whether or not anyone cares, whether or not anyone's ever going to read it, whether or not. You want to get yourself to the point where the book, you're energetically so in love with the book that your opening chapter is the love letter to the love of your life. Oh. So that way, you are going to write it because you're already in love. If you were to write that love letter on the first date, you'd probably be saying something like, well, I'm not sure about their hair, but I mean, they're quite nice. But then they said this really weird thing. I wasn't sure about that. And, and it's like, but they paid. And so, this is the love letter has to be at the end, because when you've fallen, when all of the adventures have happened, the love letter is the beginning of the book.
Oh, that's fabulous advice. Thank you. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And headlines as well, I think, they always seem to come, well, actually, not always. Sometimes they come in immediately and I'll write the book to the headline or the story to the headline, but usually the headline's the last thing. Do you find that too?
Oh, exactly that. It really is. It really, really is. And quite often, you kind of, you get to the end and then you go, the end needs to go at the beginning. And then I need to explain how we got there. It's kind of, it's like, if you try and if you think you need to write in a linear way, you might fall over yourself, I think.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Becky. Yeah, everything you're saying really lands with me as a writer, and I'm sure it's really resonating with everyone who's tuned into this. So yeah, absolutely. Exactly. So I want to ask you about your intuition. You've had a lifetime of intuition, a very magical journey with it. When did it start, and how does it affect your writing? How does it impact your writing?
I think it's always been there, but what I realized is that other people found me weird. So I remember being a kid, and it was at one of these sort of sleepover parties, and I've always had an awareness of kind of when someone isn't happy, or I think that this is where my clowning and my comedy comes from, because you kind of tell that someone isn't all right, you try and cheer them up, because you can't actually say what's wrong because it freaks people out. And I think the first experience of that was when I was really quite little at a sleepover party, and my friend's mum was doing the washing up in the kitchen, and I just trotted up to her and said, I wouldn't worry about it. People argue all of the time, like my parents argue all of the time, but they're not getting divorced. And she was like, what? And obviously she must have been thinking about whether or not, something was going wrong with her partner, and she's thinking about whether or not the relationship's going to last. And it's not really what you expect from a small child. So she frog marched me home, still in my pajamas, and kind of like we arrived at my house, and I'm like, oh, how am I going to explain this? And she just said, I don't want your daughter playing with my daughter anymore because your daughter is spooky.
Oh my God.
I was like, okay. And I think it wasn't a surprise to my mum, the fact I was spooky. But I think that's when I sort of learnt that other people didn't see what I could see. And I say see, I think it's more hear. I hear people like they're making sound, although it's not audible to my ears. but some people sort of say, oh, I can see auras, I can see your aura, you've got lots of pink in your aura. And it's like, all you're sensing is a vibration that you're interpreting into colour, but your eyes can't see colour that is not, well, your eyes can't see anything that isn't light bouncing off a solid object. So, or not that solid. So in fact, everything that we see is actually upside down, and the brain interprets it to be the right way up. So your eyes are not seeing the colour, but your brain is probably filling the colour in to the fact that it's filling in stuff that we're missing. So I'm not saying that people who say that they can see auras can't see auras, but they're seeing a perception of energy interpreted as colour. And I hear energy interpreted as sound. So I can hear when someone's literally what we call out of tune, or their frequency is off, or they're feeling down rather than, So we talk about it all the time. I was red with anger, yellow with jealousy, and so to me, I hear people like they're making sound, and I started to get to a point where I could identify what was wrong with somebody and the age that they were when they happened with how old the sound was, if you see what I mean. So it's weird to say that you can hear age in sound, but you kind of can. You can sort of hear how long it's been going. It's not like the sound gets exhausted, but it's almost like how long has the sound been running through time? So you can kind of like hear those lines. So from doing that, I think I've done that all of my life, but I think it became more acute the more I learned about psychology, the more I learned about the human condition, the more I learned about neuroscience, the more I dived into books, that anything that I could find, especially on neuroscience and psychology, I could identify sounds with conditions. And mostly the sounds come from what I would call the subselves, or our protectors, archetypes. And when we're writing stories, archetypes, characters, So you might find that the inner critic has a particular sound, or the controller, or the saboteur, or the perfectionist has a particular sound. So then you could tell when the characters shifted in conversation. So quite often someone might say, oh, I'm really suffering from a terrible lack of self-confidence. And I'd say the person talking to me isn't, but the person you're talking about is. And you could tell the difference because we're both looking at this person. And I think it's very much like being, when you're really rip-roaringly shit-faced drunk, the awareness of being drunk is completely sober. Yeah. So you get the person into their awareness of the drunk self, then you can become aware of your angry self, your controlling self, your pleaser self, your saboteur self. So then I can teach the client to be able to hear almost in the same way that I do when they're not being their authentic self, because a protector has come in order to protect their vulnerabilities, which usually keeps them stuck. So I am like the sink plunger of people's personalities. So that's how my intuition works in terms of what I do with clients in my everyday life and for myself. When it comes to my writing, I'm taking the individual and taking that back into a self, community, global. So what's the vibration globally? What's the vibration community? And listening to the sound and thinking, okay, so how do we transform this sound into a different way of feeling? And I think that sound is powerfully in words. So anyone who has clients will know that the sound that somebody makes when they're talking about something, even when people sort of say, oh, silly me, or I'm a bit of an idiot, or, oh, I've always done this, or I'll try and do this. I remember I use a lot of reverse psychology and humour in my sessions. Like, I'm not being that funny today, but I use so much humour. And I had a lady come to see me, and she came with the sound of somebody who had tried everything but actually done nothing. So she had been to, and she said, I've seen this person, this person, this person, this person, this person, psychiatrist, this, that, the other, I've done yoga, I've done this, I've done that, I've done the other, nothing works. My problem is huge. And you could feel the weight in the sound of the burden of the problem that she was carrying. And if I'd have tried to fix it, she would have just hung on to it harder because it was her identity. And so I swapped out her identity, and I won't say the F-bomb, I basically said, it sounds to me like you're effed. She went, I'm not. No. What are you talking about? How? What? And she was very posh. And she said, I'm not wronged. I could do this and this and this and this and this and this and this. And she lightened up and lightened up and lightened up and lightened up. And then she went, you clever little cow. She knew the answers. She just wanted to stay in her identity. And when I took away that identity and gave her a new identity, the identity of a completely effed up woman, she didn't want to own that. But that's what she came to me telling me she was. She came to me telling me, I am a mess. I am broken. I am absolutely. And so when I called her it, she was, oh, that's ridiculous. What? And so, because she didn't really want to own it. So she undid all of the stuff. And I think, you know, that when it comes to sort of writing and the power of the words that we're using, when you're putting words into a book, and I do get, it's funny, I do get gnarly when I see, I'm really against pain poking, and I see a lot of personal development books, and in fact anything like, I spent a lot of time on Clubhouse, and one of my pet hates, you know how people hate people who say it's like, or people say, to be honest, which means I'm about to lie. One of the things that I really hate is when people say it's important. It's important, and they elongate. It's so important, and or miss off the T, which is even worse. It's important. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you, because it's usually underlining something that's a profound piece of common sense that has no level of importance whatsoever. And books that are just full of this is really important, really, it's get on my nerves, because they're just underlining the problem with the word important, like the word chronic, underlining a situation so it becomes an identity. And whenever you have something that's out of alignment, the minute you have a feeling, it passes through you. The minute you change a feeling to a condition, then you're kind of getting a little bit more stuck, and a condition can become a character. So we all know the miserable old bugger that lives at number 43. We all know the anxious ridden old cow that lives at blah, blah, blah. You get the face you deserve. The lines start to come in, and the misery lines and the chat face, and all of these things come from when we buy into our story. So when you're writing a book, this is a long elongated way to make this one little point, but it's important. But when you're writing a book, you are changing a story. And when you have a memory, you're just having a memory of a memory, and then you have a memory about the memory, because we can't remember, we don't remember, and so we change the memory every time we have the memory. So if you can rewrite your story, then you absolutely rewrite your memory of yourself. You don't end up with a condition. And a bit like that psychology triangle of the hero, persecutor, and the victim, you can rewrite a victimized story to become the hero in your story. So no matter what happened to you in the past, write a better story. So to me, when you're writing, you are changing a narrative, and not just the narrative for a person, but the narrative for the whole of society. And so to me, intuition is to feel deeply into the story, to be the hunchback old witch, to be the character, to feel so deeply into the story, it becomes a somatic presence, and then transform it like you're the pumpkin into the chariot in Cinderella, transform it into something that takes that story into a new transformational process. I started my career in theatre, and I was drawn to theatre because I loved transformation, and I went from theatrical transformation into personal transformation, and now work for a council where I'm doing town transformation, and with my authoring of books and story, all of that is about transformation. And I think as a writer, you've got to see your work as being literally being able to change the neuroplasticity of the person who is reading your book, because you can. You absolutely can. That is the power you have. Mm-hmm. So when you're like, oh, I'm just a writer, no, you are the alchemist. You know, you have the capacity to heal, because the words heal. And just a really small side product, because I'm now really talking a lot, so and I never give you the opportunity to edit because I talk so really quickly, it'd be really impossible to be able to edit anything that I say. One of my favourite books is an Anne Rice book. I love Anne Rice, but one of my favourite books is Tale of the Body Thief, which is in the series of the Vampire Chronicles. So the starting of that, anyone will probably know, is Interview with the Vampire, and he's talking to a woman who's a healer and a nurse, and she said, you know, I prayed to God to save somebody, and that person was saved, and I promised God that I would devote myself to doing His work, which is why my fingers are so gnarled up now with arthritis. But I used to be an incredible classical pianist, you know, incredibly gifted pianist. And Lestat, who's the main character, says, don't you think that you create just as much healing, if not more, by beautiful music than you do by mopping somebody's brow? And that, you know, like, you are the prevention of the illness rather than the cure. And the character loses her mind, because she realizes the truth in that. And
you see that you see the ego being wrapped up in that identity, and then you have to untangle that, and then what are you left with? Yeah.
And you should bloody hear what it sounds like.
I love this, Becky. I've never heard anybody describe writing in that way. That is so new for me. I totally understand. I used to have a friend who was a jazz pianist, and he would see sounds as shapes. And that took me a while to get my head around. And what fascinates me is how everybody has this whole different reality going on inside. And, you know, you're describing hearing, you're not hearing messages. It's not as though, you know, you've got voices speaking in your ear, although I'm sure that does happen too. But you are hearing the vibrations. And then you're harmonizing them, but you're also, you know, you're watching them go off into time and space. And it's just, I mean, this is time travel for me. This is sci-fi. You know, you're understanding how you work is, I love it. I love it. I mean, it's so original. I absolutely love it. Thank you.
I mean, it was, you know, I used to describe that when I had my radio show on LBC, and it was, at the time, it was called London's Biggest Conversation, not Leading Britain's Conversation. It was a very different station. And I used to imagine that these sound were like lights coming out of taxis. And I remember, and I imagined it a lot, kind of like there was an old Andrex puppy, which is a toilet roll advert, with the kind of like the puppy just leaving rolls of toilet roll everywhere. And this was me with the taxis coming out of the sound frequencies of the black cabs that used to listen to LBC a lot. And I remember getting into the back of a taxi and just saying where I was going. And he just stopped him and I went, "Oh God, you're Becky Walsh." And I went, "Yes." And this, I mean, to be recognized by your voice. And he just went, "You changed my life." And then tells me all about me talking to somebody, because it was a phone-in radio show, and me talking to somebody, and what I was saying to them felt like I was talking to him. And at the time he was suicidal. And he said, "Then the next caller, it felt like you were talking to me. And then the next caller felt like you were talking to me." And I pulled over in a lay-by and I just sat in the car until I felt completely differently about my life. And to me, I think that's why I have been obsessed with radio and done a lot of broadcasting. I worked freelance for the BBC for about 5 years, but then did a little bit of podcasting, but then kind of went into TV presenting and things like that. And it's probably why I love Clubhouse so much. But I think that when you do realize that your voice, you know, I mean, I'm talking with my head voice right now, but the minute I talk in my heart voice, I could honestly be talking about, you know, reading the side of a baked bean can, but you would still feel it somewhere else. And you hear it on radio when they say things like, and coming up with the show, we're going to be talking to Mark, and Mark has got the largest Lego set that there is in the world. And then later on in the programme, we're going to be talking to Margaret, whose husband tragically died in a bus accident last February. And they don't even know that they're doing it. They don't even know. It's not like a radio technique. It's not like what you're taught, but they go from head to heart voice. And a heart voice, when you hear it, cracks you open, you know, and we can hear it in minor chords in Coldplay songs, you know, it cracks you open. And the vibration of words crack you open. And when you're writing, you're wanting to have the same level of connection with an audience as when you're writing. You write in your heart voice. You don't write in your head voice. And that's why when I read books that are in the head voice, let me tell you I'm an expert, I feel like I want to punch that person in the face, because I find this is a hang up about being a woman. It feels like mansplaining, even if it's a woman writing. Yeah. And, you know, and it's that I want to have my heart cracked open by what I'm reading. I want to feel like I'm not alone because I'm connecting with the author. And all of that is about sound. Even though it's a book, it's a piece of paper, it's still sound. It's the resonance of what you're putting into your words.
Music to my ears. It really is. I totally resonate with that. You know, the Power of Words video is probably one of the best examples of that. You know, when you speak from the heart, it lands in the heart.
It does.
That's how we work. That's how we gel. So wow, thank you. That's beautiful. I've got so much food for thought. And I need to move on to another question, probably. I have another question for you.
I'll try and give shorter answers.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a few silly questions, if that's okay.
Absolutely, I can be silly.
And I haven't prepared you for this, so so we ask every writer who we interview about these 3 questions. So the first one is, if you could invite 3 people to dinner, to your ultimate dinner party, they can be in this world or in the other world, who would they be?
Tom Hiddleston.
Oh yes, I see why.
Michael prayed when he was Governor of Sherwood, he'd have to come in the entire costume, just so you know. And Alan Rickman. And just literally, because I could do with losing some weight and there's no way I could eat in front of any of them. And I would just sit there and watch them laughing. And, you know, I don't need, you know, it's that idea of a dinner party to be with intellectual people. But usually what happens, if you get a table of intellectual people together, they get into this one-upmanship ego thing. I just want to flirt with disgustingly attractive men. And and someone else is cooking, aren't they? Because I'm not getting up and leaving that table.
You don't need to cook, and you don't need to even speak if you don't want to. You can just sit there and absorb.
I would just sit there like that.
You.
That's what I do.
Okay, so question number 2 is, which book do you wish that you'd written, and why? And it can't be one of your own, I'm afraid.
Oh no, that's fine. That one's easy. Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth. And this is, oh my God. I mean, I know everyone talks about the power of now, but that book was just like, and again, like talk about a future book and inspired. And what was really weird about this was I just moved to San Francisco when I think I started reading A New Earth on the way kind of thing. And then I was reading it in San Francisco. And I was like, wow, he had left London because he couldn't finish the book in London. And he'd moved to San Francisco to write the book. And there was I, literally wanting to write a book for Hay House. Had been such a dream for a long time. And then there I am, you know, in San Francisco, where he had written this book. And what was odd was, I went to California Institute of Integral Studies when I was trying to work out what was going on in the brain for people who was classed as psychic, and I wasn't happy with the word. So I was studying neuroscience as well as studying my undergrad at CIIS. And we were asked to do kind of like sort of like an anthology, but we had to work alongside one of the librarians, and we had to pull all of these books and make all of these books this, you know, kind of anthology kind of thing. And the librarian that I was working with, when I told her the idea of what I wanted to write about, she went, "This isn't an anthology, it's a book." And I said, "Oh no, I've written a couple of books before. This is definitely an anthology." She said, "No, it's not, it's a book." And she goes, "It's got knowing in the title. It's know, you know, knowing. Knowing is in the title of this book." And she helped me pull out some research material. She was the editor of A New Earth. Oh my God. Oh my God. Didn't find out that until I'd finished working with her. And I was like, oh, so this woman had, predicted my book, and I tracked her down after it was out and published and wrote and thanked her, and of course she didn't remember saying it, but I was just like blown away by the fact that I had exactly the same impetus as Eckhart Tolle, and I just loved him. And so yeah, it would have to be Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth. And I really absolutely loved that book. It was real life-changing when I read that book. Really good.
One of the few books I've read more than 4 times.
And every time you read it, it's like you've removed a layer of yourself that resisted the words, and then you hear it more clearly every time you read it. In fact, you've reminded me I really ought to read it again. But and I think it doesn't lose its impact no matter what seems to be going on in the world. You know, I can't imagine it becoming dated.
No, it doesn't age. It stays completely ageless, a bit like Cliff Richard. But yeah.
Well, with the odd jab, you know, needle. I'm not saying, but probably, you know, just the odd can't frown.
Moving on. Yeah.
Before I get sued.
My third and final question. What would make you blush as a writer if somebody found out about it?
Oh, this has happened. Oh,
Juicy.
Oh God. Okay, so I will not mention the publisher or the book, but I had a member of the public send me a copy of my book in the post, covered in red pen, because the book had not been edited.
Oh, ouch.
And so the publisher had to withdraw the book from sale. And that I know that the person sent it to me with the best of intentions, actually, but the triggering of being back at school and the red pen. And I think no matter who you are, I think when you're writing the book, it's great and it's a lovely journey. The problem is when you get the jiffy bag with the first copy of your book in. And I remember the first time I got this jiffy bag, and at the time, because I was a radio presenter, I was being sent books all the time to endorse, you know, so Becky Walsh, this is an amazing read. And I opened the jiffy bag, pulled it out, went, oh God, it's the book, and cleaned the house from top to bottom, because it's only at that point that the real imposter syndrome comes in. You're too busy for it, but apart from then. And then you suddenly go, my God, I have signed myself to these words. What if somebody thinks I'm an absolute twat? Because of course they would actually be right. I don't think there's anything wrong with being a twat. It's just being a twat. Just love the fact that you're a twat. But what I really, I just, that sort of, to be found out, to have somebody kind of go, I wasn't so worried about bad reviews or anything like that, but to have something that you have poured all of your heart and time into, and then someone has been so colossally disappointed by just the grammar of it. So when it came to me in red pen, covered in red pen, it really triggered I'm still at school. I'm the person who, like, you know, I struggled at school. I was put in a special needs group. I had 4 different junior schools. So I was always classed as stupid or lazy or doesn't apply herself. And this is in the days before there were tests on dyslexia. So, oh God, getting a book covered in red pen was just horrific. It was really horrific. It just triggered up all sorts of stuff and made me really kind of not think, you know, I really went into a hole of kind of like going, why did you ever say that you could do this? You're just fake, you're an idiot, everybody's going to find out that you really shouldn't be doing this. You've really just managed to pluff your ego up to a point where you've just become like delusional, like just it was like spewing out. I mean, Brené Brown talks about this so much, but spewing out shame that I had archetyped my way out of, and it just all kind of really came up. And I was all right. I mean, it was all right. I mean, nothing bad happened, and I've gone on to write lots of other books. But my God, I rate. I talk to my editors now. I didn't get to talk to that editor at all. I had no interaction with the editor. That's probably because they didn't exist. But as we now discovered. But now I'm really hot on that. I self-published a book and went to my Hay House editor to get it edited. Anyone who's writing, get a damn editor, get an editor, get a good editor. It is not your auntie who knows grammar. It is an editor. I'm telling you now, it's an editor. Just because she can spell doesn't make her an editor. Get an editor.
It's a real one.
A real one.
That's so encouraging, though, to hear you say that, all that imposter syndrome self-talk that comes up, because I know pretty much everybody in this group will have had those same voices. And to see, I mean, you're a very successful woman, you're a very successful writer, you're very confident, and to know that you have also experienced that, I think is really, it's very encouraging, and it feels, it's like, we're all in this together, we're all going to go through that hero's journey and come out the other side of it.
Yeah, I mean, you are biologically programmed to fear being kicked out of the tribe. You're programmed for that, because it's survival of the fittest, not the fittest. And we are programmed to fear rejection. And so this is the one thing, because we're programmed to do that stops all great public speakers, all great writers, all great people who are born a performer or an inspiration person or a leader, because we worry about what someone else is going to say when no one is even looking at you. No one is looking at you. Try walking down a high street naked. Nobody looks at you. I've done it. Nobody.
Only at the weekend.
But honestly, I've seen people just go, oh, look at what. Everybody's perception of you is based on what they think of themselves. That nobody thinks anything of you, and which is very upsetting, because then I question whether or not you can actually even be loved, or whether or not someone just loves themselves in your company. There you go.
Now we're going deep. We're going into existential questions.
I know, I love it. Like questions, I'm answered to turn it into darkness.
Oh, Becky, you're a gem. Every conversation we have, we go off on tangents, and we always sort of come back to this still point, and I think that's where we're at now. So bless you. Thank you so much. It's been really inspirational. I'm sure everybody here has been hanging on your every word. Do you have one parting piece of advice to give to a writer who might be struggling or stuck in some way? Is there anything that you can impart from your intuitive wisdom?
Well, I'm going to use provocative therapy. Give it up. It's a waste of time. Just don't bother. There's so many books out there in the world. Why on earth do you think that your book's actually going to be any good?
Love it.
Because
that would work for me.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you're going to be a failure. Just forget it. Do you realize that a best-selling book is just as difficult as winning the lottery? Get yourself a lottery ticket instead, love. Do that.
Go and sweep the floor.
And whatever you do, don't write a book in my genre. You might take my sales away from me. Move over. I think the thing is, I think that most of us kind of, you want to be told encouraging stuff, actually, but actually, what really works is being told, no, you're a little bit rubbish. Who do you think you are, really? Because if you are going to really make it as a writer, you need to have an I'll show you attitude, not an I can do attitude. You need to have there is a problem in the world and I'm here to fix it, and nothing is going to get in my way. I am here to transform something that needs transforming. I am here as the antidote for something really important going on in the world. I will not sit here a moment longer and have people feel fear or pain or discomfort. I will change the world. I am here to do that. So I don't want to encourage anyone to do that. I want to tell you that you can't, because then if you get the I'll show you attitude, then you will end up with a best-selling book, because it's not the, oh, I want to create something beautiful that actually makes you create. It's the I am angry, my heart is in pain, and I feel this so strongly that nothing is going to stop me from being able to be the transformational artist I was born to be. I'm going to do something about this. And so I don't think encouragement really helps. It can do. I think it's always good to have someone on your side, but usually you just bleat to that person about how rubbish you are, and they go, oh no, don't worry. No, you ain't got time for that. The world is a freaking mess. You have not got time to sit there in self-addiction or self-indulgence telling me you can't write. Pick up the freaking pen, stop your moaning. That's my best inspiration.
Oh, it's great. Yep, that's exactly what's needed. That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're really welcome, and good luck with your writing, everybody. The world doesn't need words. Get on with it. Thanks.
Yeah, there you go.
No pressure.
Take the other way. And you're an alchemist. That's the other thing to take away.
You're an alchemist.
And you're an alchemist. Yeah. Thank you so much. Where can we find out more about you? Where can we get hold of your books? Where can we find out about your new stand-up show? Tell us everything.
It's all on beckywalsh.com, so that has like leanings to my YouTube channel, to me on Clubhouse, to, you know, me on Instagram, all of those different places. All good bookshops should be carrying my books, but they don't. So you have to go in and order them. Yeah, so I always try and get down to a bookshop, but you can find them online as well. So yeah, that's kind of everything. If you go to beckywalsh.com, everything is kind of springboarded off there, and there's loads of free content. In fact, there's also a free course on there on intuition. So if you want to learn about your different intuitive types, then there's a course called the Listening Series. So you can dive deep into that.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. I will put the links down below so you can find them. Once again, Becky, you're a genius. I wish you every success with all that you're doing. You really are. You're such a strong voice in the world. Keep going. Keep going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Somebody told me it's not right what I do. Somebody claimed what I believe is not true. So many voices fighting to make their way through. I get trapped in circles trying to feel which words are true. Nobody knows my steps today. Only the voice inside of me can say. Nobody knows what's best for you. Only the voice inside holds the truth. So listen. Listen. Somebody told me you can't walk out that door, turning your back on everything you knew before. What they don't understand is I've opened up to more of who I am, to the voice of my core. Nobody knows my steps today. Only the voice inside of me can say. Nobody knows what's best for you. Only the voice inside holds the truth. So listen. Listen. It doesn't matter what I know, where I go, what I say, to whom I pray, what I do, as long as I stay true. It doesn't matter what you know, where you go, what you say, to whom you pray. Doesn't matter what you do and follow it, the voice in you. Nobody knows my steps today. Only the voice inside of me can say. Nobody knows what's best for you. Only the voice inside holds the truth. So listen. 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 Listen.